Hello, Helen. So wonderful to have you on my show. A writer.
I know, another
Gosh.
creative person.
And everyone's going, wait, there, you're calling her Helen. But we can see a book behind her which says A.A. Abbott.
Yes, A.A. Abbott is my pen name, cunningly constructed to be right at the front of the bookshelves. I've never met another writer who's beat me to it.
Gosh, that is good. And the day somebody puts AA, are you going to go AAAA?
Good idea. Yeah.
But look what I've got.
Oh, you've got bright lies too.
I've got bright lies too as well. So come on, tell us what is the story about? Because I know that before you've written quite a few books. They're always been Birmingham based, which is wonderful, which is what I love about the stuff that you do. You always kind of keep it within a specific area, and over the last few years you did the trail series in relation to the vodka wars, which were based around the Birmingham area, whether it was in the jewellery quarter, Digbeth. You're going to tell me something totally different and go bright lies, because I haven't read the book, even though I've got it. I haven't read it yet. I will read it. Now you're going to tell me no, it's not based in Birmingham, it's based in Bristol.
It begins in Bristol, but it all ends in Birmingham. And it's in Birmingham where there's a dramatic showdown, as there always is in my books. In The Bride's Trail, the first of the trail series, there's a brilliant showdown in the anchor tunnels under the jewellery quarter. And in Bright Lies, there's a showdown in a squat in Digbeth. In
Digbeth itself. So what is the story about this time around? So is this, obviously, you know, with the trail series, is this part of the trail series, or is this something totally new? It's not connected to the trail series. The only connection is the name, and obviously you being the writer, and Birmingham, but otherwise there's no real direct connection.
It's completely different, and it stands alone from the trail series. So the trail series finished with the final trail when all the characters rode away into the sunset and hopefully lived happily ever after. The trail series was very much mystery and crime thrillers. This is much more a psychological thriller. Crime does feature in it, but it is mainly about suspense and danger. And it begins with Emily, a 12-year-old girl who lives in a village in Somerset, being invited to an art exhibition in Bath. And at this art exhibition, she meets David, a rich, handsome and charismatic young painter. And he's the man who's going to change the course of her life.
Are there any particular themes in terms of that you explore in terms of the story itself?
Yes. David is a predator. He's an abuser, and he targets Emily. She loves art. He loves art too. She's young. She's pretty. And when he meets her, most importantly, he establishes that there is no man on the scene. She's the child of a single parent. And David then hones in on her mother, ends up marrying her mother, and begins to abuse Emily. And she believes that she's in love. She's completely suckered and taken in. And I got advice from 3 former policemen who've worked with in the Avon of Somerset Police, and one of them in particular specialised in abuse cases, and she said it's very hard to get victims to testify because a lot of the time they believe that their abuser is their boyfriend. They believe that it's love. They don't see it for what it really is. And in Bright Lies, the Bright Lies, by the way, refers to what David tells Emily and her mother. They completely fall for his story, that he is nothing more than somebody who wants to have a family. He's thrilled to be a caring stepfather.
So,
then
go on, Helen. Go on.
Then he tells Emily that really he loves her, he's always loved her, and she believes him because he has spent so long grooming her. He's spent so long insinuating himself into the affections of her and her mother. And when Emily eventually realises that she's not the only one and that actually he is a dangerous person and he turns violent in an attempt to control her, then she runs away from home and ends up in Birmingham purely by chance, because somebody gives her a free coach ticket and she's able to get to Birmingham that way. And she's homeless in Digbeth and ends up in a really difficult and dangerous situation where she's rescued by Jack, a club DJ who's on his way home to his squat. Although he's a DJ, he's only just started in the business. He's somebody who's faced his own demons in the past. His family was broken apart by his father's drunken domestic violence. And as a result, Jack is somebody who's very protective towards women, and he will always step in to help a woman in trouble. And that's what he sees when he comes across homeless Emily being attacked by a couple of drunken layabouts. He wades in, he saves her, and gradually they become friends.
In terms of the subject matter, so what comes first for you? Do you think of a character and go, right, here's a character, this is a situation, or do you kind of go, well, this subject matter is quite dear to me and it's something that I want to explore? So I'm just looking at perhaps the initial idea and the process in terms of your writing method.
It's definitely character-led. And sometimes there are themes that come about as a result of that, but it tends to be the characters who drive the story. And this one's different from everything else I've ever written, because the idea came in a dream about 30 years ago, and the dream was about Jack. And in the dream, he was a much darker character, but he and his squat in Digbeth were there. Of course, in the last 30 years, there have been a lot of changes, not just to technology, so they're all on Facebook now, but to Digbeth. Digbeth 30 years ago was even rougher around the edges than it is now. And I know that it's trending up and it's hip and it's smart, but it's still got a lot of old industrial buildings that aren't being used. And that's why it is so possible that a building could be squatted in Digbeth.
With the subject matter, you mentioned domestic abuse, sexual abuse. What kind of research do you draw on? Is there a lot of research that goes into it?
Yes. To be fair, because of the pandemic, this time I didn't do so much initial research. I just wrote a draft of the book, and then I got a lot of people to read it. So it ended up being significantly changed from the first draft, because I got a lot of advice from abuse survivors, from teachers, from ex-policemen who'd worked with abuse victims and done child safeguarding. So initially the characters were not so well drawn, but by the time I'd had teachers and policemen explain how abusers operate and how they go about grooming their victims, I feel I was able to construct a story that's really believable.
Mm-hmm. Do you find does it become difficult for you in the sense of trying to keep yourself not getting too emotionally involved? Obviously, when you're going into people who are victims of domestic abuse or sexual abuse and hearing their stories, and you're kind of like, oh my gosh, because you can really get drawn into the emotion. Do you find a way of protecting yourself and then also getting the best out in terms of putting that in terms of material into your book as well?
Yeah, it is rough. It is rough to hear about what people have gone through. But at the same time, it's also encouraging that they've come out the other side. And that fed into the story as well, because ultimately the young people, Jack and Emily, are affected by their experiences, but they also are self-aware enough to rise above them. You can see them on a journey where ultimately they will succeed in leaving the bad stuff behind and moving forward to a brighter future.
The book's based in the story's based in Birmingham. Do you use any lingo, local lingo, or do you kind of, oh no, I'm going to keep away from that, and if you want to adapt it, you can do, or I mean, because there are specific words, aren't there, when you're from Birmingham, you know, whether it's all right, bab, or whatever.
Bab is the big one. I must say, you know, personally, as a lady of a certain age now, I love it when people call me Bab. I just love it. It doesn't happen very often anymore, but, you know, when it does, I take it. And I do use Bab throughout my books. In the Trail series, there was a character called Marty who called everyone Bab. And foreign readers took me to task over it because they were sure it was a typo. So in Bright Lies, right at the start, I've got the usual disclaimer saying it's a work of fiction, but I also say that it does contain dialect words like bab and bobowler, bobowler or moth. Look, here's one.
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
Do you?
Bobowler. No.
It might be more of a black country term, to be fair, but a lot of my Brummie friends do know it.
Uh-huh. Which it's great. Bobowler, you're kind of like, wow, that just sounds, and it's the Brummie term for moth.
Yes, and in the book, the nightclub where Jack and Emily both work is called Bobowlers.
Gosh. So when can people get the book? Is it available now? What do I need to do? I know I've got my copy, but what do others need to do? How can they get the book?
It's totally available. It's available online, probably easiest to order it online, to be fair. You can get an ebook. The ebook is available for sale, but it's also in a program called Kindle Unlimited. So people who've got a Kindle Unlimited subscription can just read it for free, but it costs less than a cup of coffee to buy. And it's available in a standard paperback format, and also, I treat my readers, large print.
Wow. Brilliant.
And I always do a dyslexia-friendly version as well, and I don't know if you can actually see that, but
yeah,
it's got a very
it's just a lot more space in, isn't there?
Lot more space. It's a large font, and it's a sans serif font, and it's basically formatted in accordance with British Dyslexia Association guidelines and documents. It is really, really easy to read. So those are all available online and can be ordered.
That is wonderful. I've also learned that there's somebody who's not too far away from this conversation who's also in this book. It's me. Oh my gosh. Oh.
And yes, I was absolutely overwhelmed when you volunteered to be in the book.
You know what? It's just great because I read it on the first page, and I was just kind of like, oh my gosh, I'm in there, and I was like, oh yeah, I did say to Helen, yeah, put me in the book, and it's like, yeah, so it's got Vimal Corpel, it's got my name in there. I was like, wow, and I just showed it to the wife. I went, look, and she went, wow. So I'm gonna have to start tweeting it now to everybody. Look, I'm in the book. I'm the bad. Yeah. No, I'm not the baddie. I'm a nice guy. No, maybe read it and make your own judgments whether I'm a good guy or a bad guy, or whoever it is. But thank you so much for putting me in the book, which is wonderful.
It's a pleasure. Thanks very much for being such a good sport and being prepared to meet Jack at the Bobowlers.
Brilliant. And you do have another friend who's also in the book.
Yes. Well, funnily enough, when I mentioned to my friend Sophia that the famous Vimal Corporal had volunteered to be in my new book, she asked if she could be in it as well. So she pops up towards the end, giving out McDonald's breakfasts to downstairs in the centre of Birmingham, which is something that she actually does because she never gives money to the homeless, but she always buys some food at Mackie D's.
Do you think that's kind of become your signature, whereby you kind of you'll get various people now with all books that, and go, right, is it okay I put your name in? Yeah, okay, yeah, great. You're in the book whether you like it or not. So yeah, no, I think that is wonderful and it's great. So as you've said, it's available on Kindle. They can order it. How would they can order it again via most bookshops as well, or is it directly?
Absolutely. If you go into a bookshop, if they've got it, that's wonderful. But if they haven't, they'll be able to order it in so they can get it for you.
And how have you found this whole experience in terms of, because did you say this has been a real change in terms of your writing style, or is the writing style still the same in terms of the Trail series? Because it's a psychological thriller where the previous ones haven't been so much of a psychological thriller. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, absolutely. So this is a much darker book and it goes into more depth with the characters. So in the Trail series, we meet a huge cast of characters slugging it out for control of their high-end vodka business. And in Bright Lies, it's very much focused on Jack and Emily. And we get to see Emily's point of view in the first person as well. So she's telling her story directly to the reader as she experiences it. And that's a bit of a departure, because I've not written in first person before. It's always been he said and she said.
Great.
And we're hearing what Emily does right from the start. And the book begins with Emily in December 2019 going to visit somebody in prison against the wishes of her mother. And all we know is that Emily is visiting a man in prison, and we don't know why and who it is. And immediately, having brought us into almost the present day, the book steps back to 2014 when Emily meets David.
Okay, nice.
And we get to be with her from 2014 to the present day.
So there's a real trend at the moment, from what I heard, was in terms of pen names. Obviously, you've stuck with the same pen name, A.A. Abbott.
Yeah, I did think about using a different one because the topic of the book is so sensitive. It covers child sexual abuse, it covers domestic violence. It's quite grim, and it goes into quite a lot of depth. It's not graphic, but it does go into depth. And I did think about whether that would put off the readers of the Trail series who are used to a kind of lighter, frothier read. But I decided to stick with A.A. Abbott anyway.
And in terms of in the future, would you think, because as I said, there's a trend now at the moment, isn't there, to go for a totally new pen name almost every time they release a book. I don't know who I heard, somebody on the radio the other day, they were stating, oh yeah, I make sure that there's no connection whatsoever with the previous book, and I don't even want them to know that it's connected in any way whatsoever. Is that something you're contemplating, or you kind of going, no, I want to stick to A.A. Abbott because I want to be on the first row?
Absolutely. I think the name A.A. Abbott has got a lot going for it, and I've got no plans to change it at the moment, Vimal. Which
is wonderful. Look, Helen, it's so wonderful chatting to you. Thank you so much. Book launch today. Is it today officially?
That's right. Officially, the book is out today, the 23rd of November.
Yeah, because it all ties in with is it White Ribbon Day, which is on the 25th of November, which is to end male violence against women. Are you also tying it in with that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. White Ribbon Day is a brilliant initiative because it's about men standing up and saying, we will not stand for violence against women and girls, either straight down the line violence or sexual abuse. And I think it's brilliant because 99% of men are wonderful people who would not hurt a fly. And I think it's great that men will stand up and be counted. It does tie very much in with the character of Jack in the book, because Jack, having experienced the awful shattering effects of domestic violence, is very keen not to repeat that pattern. And yet he knows that he's got anger within him. And he tries very hard to keep it under control, always to protect women. And I absolutely fell in love with him as a character, with Emily as well, because I think they're great and I wish them both well. Well, Helen, thank you so much. Is it going to be a second book coming out, connected, or is it totally new? I'm not that you're just coming out with this one now. I'm already thinking about your next book. I really have no plans for the next book at the moment, but sorry, has my screen frozen? It did. Yeah, we're back on. I think it froze slightly again. Yeah, sorry about that. No, we're okay now. So in terms of the next book, I'm going to wait for inspiration to strike. I've possibly got a few tentative ideas. It would be possible to write a sequel to Bright Lies, but I'm not sure that I want to put the characters through that much pain. I like them. I'd like them to live happily ever after. That's wonderful. Well, Helen, thank you so much. Books Bright Lies is available at all good bookshops and on the internet. So if anyone's listening, watching this, go out there and get it. Thank you so much for taking time out. It's been great to meet you and talk about Bright Lies. Thank you so much. And thank you for pointing me in the book again. I want to just stop recording now.